Hello and welcome to Practical Inclusion on what is kind of a weird Sunday here on Wadawurrung Country. Sunday, where am I? I'd love it if it was Sunday. On Wadawurrung Country, I am located in Geelong on the traditional lands of the Wadawurrung people, which I've just been learning a lot about because I'm attending a session this afternoon about how to craft your own acknowledgement to country that has meaning and value. And one of the tasks beforehand was to actually learn more about the traditional custodians of the land you're on. And so the acknowledgement I give today is to the Wadawurrung people and to their elders past and present. But hopefully by next week you see perhaps a slightly different acknowledgement to country. I'm hoping to learn some ways to impart more meaning into that acknowledgement. My guest today, Kirsten, whose land are you coming in from?
I'm coming in from the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people, so I'm in the city of Casey.
Ah, beautiful. Thank you. I don't think we've had that combination before, so that's good. Thank you so much for coming on today. This conversation is going to be a little bit different to some of the ones I've had recently and over the last couple of months. I was alerted to some of the work that you were doing, checked you out on Twitter and the website that you have, and thought, oh, what a great different conversation that we could have today. So without stealing your thunder, if you could tell us your story, what you are doing and how did you get to be doing this work? What's brought you to inclusive design?
So I'm a computer programmer, and with my PhD, I wanted to save the world. But with the skills that I have, I probably can't solve world hunger and ensure peace for the entire world. But I did think if I could make a difference to one person, that would make it, my career worthwhile. So I originally did sign language for children, particularly included in mainstream schools. So children will often, deaf children will go to mainstream schools, and if they sign when they go out in the playground, we want the other children to be able to sign with them, and there's great brain research that says, learning a sign language is actually really helpful as well for children who experience it. So since then, though, I'm from Monash University, and I'm head of the Inclusive Tech research group there in the Faculty of IT, and I'm really committed to solving real world problems. That's my big focus, is what are real world problems that people want solved with assistive technology. So I mostly used to do software, but I've moved a little bit more into hardware. And part of the reason I could go into hardware is that there's all these consumer electronic things out there that I can now sew a circuit. How cool is that? And if we want to include different people, if you can sew a circuit, that might appeal to someone different who perhaps has to solder circuits. I get migraines from soldering, so not a lot of point in that. So a couple of years ago for National Science Week, I thought I want to run an inclusive circuit making activity. So get people with disabilities involved in STEM making. So we run programs for women, or other marginalised groups. There's a few programs available for Indigenous or Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, but there was almost nothing around for people with disabilities. So I wanted to create something that was inclusive of everyone. So I developed a number of activities. One of those activities was tape lock. So what I wanted to do was come up with a circuit making activity that anyone could do, right? So circuit, electrical circuit, me going power and light. Oh, I got the wrong one. Let's grab one of these ones. Okay, power and light. Okay, to make a circuit, put them together.
Nice.
So if you have cerebral palsy, you can push them together with the back of your hand, right? Okay, so if you put them on a flat surface, you can put them together. But then you can't even get it wrong. So the idea is that whichever way around you put it, you're going to have a positive experience. Because there's so many people that think that they can't do it. And it's not that they can't make a circuit. It's not that they can't do lots of things. It's that we haven't, as designers, we haven't designed things that are accessible, that are inclusive. So I started just with these, light circuits. And then I went, but that's no good for blind participants or blind or low vision participants. Low vision, if you have a bright enough bulb, they might be able to see it. Mm-hmm. So I then started doing things like random electronic components. So this is a vibration motor. So if you're completely blind, you can actually feel that you've made the circuit successfully. Now, circuit making is one of those things that people with who are blind are often excluded from, because you have little wires and little tiny holes, and it's not an accessible experience in the world. And then, of course, I started doing some stuff with, the other group that I was working with was people with intellectual disabilities, and they love movement. So we also have a fan tape lock. It's fun. It's amazing what actually works with, like that just uses the 3-volt battery. And and then so from this, it was like, this was a really good idea. And I just didn't want to, so it's different to what other people do. There's a few things, so, soldering, but even there's snap circuits are available, but you have to be able to push really hard to get them to connect in. And they're not very flexible. So it was about really designing things that anyone can use. But some of it's around the designing something that anyone can use. Some of it is around educating. So I take a maker space, so educating, university students coming through that they can also think about assistive technology and designing things for accessibility when they're designing. And then we can also think about people with disabilities actually designing things for themselves. So a lot of assistive technologies that are designed aren't used by people or abandoned very rapidly because they don't have enough input into how they're designed. So if we can create tools where they can show us what it is that would be useful to them, then it helps us to design them as well.
Wow. I've written 5 things here that I desperately want to know more about. What you described here. And of course, for those listening who don't know about me, I do have a science background, so this stuff absolutely makes me so excited. I'm like a little kid. And I remember being the little kid having the circuit kit that Dad would bring home from school. He was a school principal, and occasionally he would bring home the school's circuit kit. And I would have so much fun with the fans and the light bulbs and turn them on. And just thinking about how that experience is totally not available until these types of things for people who do have disability. No wonder there's not more people moving into science or interested, as you say, because it's not even the ability there for them to engage with the concepts from the start.
So one of the things with that is, as well as the actual blocks, we also make characters. So we turn the tape blocks into characters. So I have dragons and owls and birds and trains and cars and that I've made out of the tape blocks, because it's not just, part of it is, you can make a circuit. It's then, but why would I want to make a circuit? You know how cool it is. I know how cool it is. But for people who've never done it, they don't know that it's so cool. So it's around finding ways that actually make it accessible, but also that there's a purpose, there's some meaning that comes out of it.
Yeah, great. Can I ask you about designing for accessibility? Is this something, certainly when I was doing science, there was no talk about this at all. For a young or old student going through university now in IT or in science, are they getting education around how to design for inclusion and accessibility, or is this something that's still an emerging space?
I think there is I think there's a real diversity. So some are doing it well and have been thinking about it for a while, and some really haven't been thinking about it that long, but it's definitely one of those emerging themes that's coming out for people, that we're integrating it into more courses. I'm part of the faculty of IT, and we're trying to integrate it into, so that every student, undergraduate and postgraduate, is exposed to, the concept of accessible design. But also, I'm very passionate about trying to give people opportunities to actually work with people with disabilities, because then you can see, what the real need is. It's one thing to learn it. It's that real practical experience that's important to actually understand. And I think there is often a gap between the people with lived experience of disability and people designing for it. They just don't understand because they don't talk the same language. So a couple of years ago, I actually I decided on my long service leave that I would make I'd learn Braille, as you do. Everyone learns Braille on this long service leave. So Braille, when you're learning it, everyone learns it in a straight line, but Braille itself is 6 dots in a rectangle. You've probably seen it on doors and things like that. So in a rectangle. So I was like, as a sighted person learning Braille, why would I not learn it in a rectangular shape? So I made an egg carton and Play-Doh keyboard because I can, right? And then it was, that's a bit wide. And then I made it narrower, and then I made it smaller, and then I put buttons on, and then, and then if you actually took the Braille keyboard and flipped it over, you learned the right fingering for regular Braille keyboards as well. Like, why wasn't this solved years ago? Like, it's a really simple problem, and it's because people learning Braille aren't the people who can make keyboards. So there's a real disconnect between seeing the need, and so for blind people, there are Braille displays. They're great, they're fantastic, they're expensive. If you're blind and you use Braille, you're absolutely going to have one. But for parents of blind children and teachers who have a blind child come through their class, it's really important that they're comfortable with Braille. Because how do you encourage a child to do something that they're not comfortable with?
That they can't do, yeah.
So a relatively cheap keyboard just makes people feel more comfortable that they can have a practice. Braille, level 1 Braille is not that hard to learn.
Yeah, right. Because Auslan challenged me beyond what I thought possible. And I was going to say, when you picked that up before about Auslan, if you are looking to challenge your brain as a child or an adult, what a great way to do it is to attend online Zoom classes, which I did on Auslan, because that is stepping totally into, for me, it was a space I was totally uncomfortable in, and I found it work my brain in ways that I hadn't remembered using it before. I think and so powerful to be able to converse with people in their language. It was a really meaningful experience. So I'd highly recommend people to do that.
So I know Auslan enough, sort of like bad schoolgirl French, enough to communicate, but people have to be really, really patient with me. Yeah. But I'm actually partially deaf, so I have hearing in one ear and not the other. So I'm not deaf enough to be considered deaf, but I get things wrong often enough for it to be inconvenient.
Just this morning, I was learning there was a TikTok post that was showing the Auslan signs for the LGBTI community, and I just learned that I think this is bisexual, and I just learned that this morning. I'm like, awesome! I love how expressive the language is. So back to what I was going to ask you on what you're talking about when it comes to having somebody with lived experience involved in the designing process, to me, is really the concept that underpins the need for diversity and inclusion in any sector, in any sphere, right? And we see, and sometimes this message is a little bit hard to convey, but I think the way you've described it there is perfect. Because if you can't bring those voices into the table that you're actually designing the thing or making the decisions, then you can't expect to be able to design inclusively.
Absolutely. Because there is a depth of knowledge of people who live with a particular disability, and they just get the things, because as researchers, we often have a technology looking for a problem, where what we need is a problem looking for a technology. I had a friend who had ALS. I'm going motor neuron. He went out in his wheelchair, and the wheelchair battery stopped working. He was outside in the sun on a 30-degree day for several hours and got sunburnt. It was really bad. He had an iPad with him, but no one thought about using Find My iPad or Find My Phone is a mainstream technology that could have been used to actually assist in that particular circumstance. So there's a lot of mainstream technologies now that one of the big bonuses for the deaf community has actually been SMS. Everyone now has a text machine with them all the time. So where telephone calls were really, really unavailable for deaf people and, previously, now deaf people actually can communicate with, many more people because many more people have phones that they can text on. So, I mean, that's been an absolutely huge bonus for, for communication for deaf people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've used that myself, having a player in my cricket team who was deaf. And I'd carry my phone as the coach and would type the instructions into the text message. So can certainly relate to that experience. So I'm really loving this conversation around inclusive design. What do you think we need? Is it universities? Is it companies to? How do we think we empower them to understand the value or see the value in actually true inclusive design?
They're customers. So the people with disabilities are customers. Okay. The other thing I'd say is, it just, for me, it's so obvious. So I'm like, it's so obvious. So I designed the tape blocks. Okay. Got the tape blocks? Great. They're great for people with disabilities. But you know what? They're also great for kids.
Yeah.
They're great for 16-year-old girls who are scared of making circuits. They're great for people in aged care. So by creating inclusive items, then you actually include everyone, and it's often the people that you haven't thought about that haven't had access to things who benefit, but actually everyone in the community benefits from having accessible design. And I mean, they use that anyone can be a person with a disability at some stage. I know I've had shoulder surgeries recently. So, you realize some of the things that you just take for granted, that there's no reason they be the way they are. They're like it because they've traditionally been that way rather than they actually need to be. Yeah. I think it's everyone's job. Look, I think it starts with education in terms of, I'm at a university, so being able to educate people within university is really important. But that leaves... we are not the only people. We are not the only group that can do this. I went to MedHack on the weekend, and they had co-designers who had lived experience of disability, working with students and anyone who wanted to get involved in MedHack. So there are opportunities out there for everyone to get involved and at any point in their career, at any point in their life.
Yeah, beautiful. And what's MedHack?
So MedHack is run by the Monash University Young Innovators. You can look it up. They have a thing on LinkedIn. So it runs each year, and it's for students from all of the universities. So we had medical students as well as engineering students, IT students, and arts students, and from all psychology students from everywhere, getting together in teams and creating things. Coming up with ideas to how to actually both design things but think about problems that haven't been thought about in the past.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff we love. Bring groups together. If anybody's watching live or on the replay and they've got questions, please feel free to place them in the chat. If they're live, we will get to them. If it's through the replay, we'll definitely tag Kirsten and get some conversation happening there. In terms of the tape blocks themselves, obviously they're available for people to purchase or, And
so I have a site called tapeblock.com. Originally, I just thought if I have this great idea and I tell people about it, everyone will be able to use them. And then what I discovered is that, unlike me, most people aren't comfortable ordering random electronic items. So, and I get the blocks actually custom made. So that I get all rectangles. So all of the blocks I've showed you are rectangles, but you can use any shape block. It doesn't matter. It's just for, demonstration purpose, having the same blocks makes it easier. So what I did was I had a whole lot of videos on YouTube of both pictures and videos showing how to make tape blocks, what they're good for, how they can be used, etc. But a lot of people didn't feel comfortable purchasing things. But also the tape that I use is actually, it's a it's a nickel copper. Yeah, there we go. Nickel copper fabric, tape. It's really, really flexible. Most people use copper tape when they're doing electronics. It corrodes and it doesn't, it's just, and I couldn't get this tape easily anywhere in Australia at the width that I wanted it. So I just ordered a whole lot in. So I started just selling that on eBay and then thought I'll put everything together in this tape blocks thing. But people are welcome to use the videos, the tutorials. I just want the idea out there because I work within the university sector. We work with very much on grants. So if I have a grant, I have funding to run these activities. If I don't have a grant, I don't have any funding. So I had a lot of people saying, oh, how can I get the tape blocks? And there's no way to move easily from that. I can just supply them because I've got this grant available to people. Often have funding, but I didn't have the capacity. So, setting up a company and a website and making them available was really a service activity in terms of trying to get it out into the community. I've tried a few different ways of when I've had innovations, trying to get them out into the community. This is the latest attempt.
Yeah, fascinating. That could give us a whole another episode because that's startups and how you actually move technology out of the university world into everybody else.
It's such a small scale thing. So like I bought some tape in to start and then, different components, etc. It's not necessarily something that the university would be interested in commercializing or because it's such a niche thing. But for the people that it counts for, it really matters.
Yeah,
it matters, and that was back to my, I wanted to do when I did my PhD, I wanted to change the world.
Yeah.
Maybe tape blocks can help a few people or make a difference in a few people's lives or change a few people's attitudes, or do you know what I mean? So it's niche, but the impact is still important.
Absolutely. And that's, we talk about that often on this show when we get diversity and inclusion professionals in, because, you have that passion, as you say, to change the world, and we can't all do that. But even if we have an impact on one person's life, that makes this work valuable and worthwhile. And I think you're certainly doing that. And I know my kids don't have any difficulty working with things like that, but they would much prefer to use the tape blocks, as you said before, I think, than creating, working with a real circuit kit at this stage. So I think that's perhaps one of the key messages to take away too, is that idea that we make something inclusive for one part of the population. Chances are we actually include a whole bunch of other people that felt excluded from that activity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. That was kind of one of the key takeaways for me, and I'm glad that you circled back to that, that impact doing a PhD because you wanted to change the world. And we've gone through a whole range of different topics in this conversation. I really enjoyed it. I'm just going to stick up the tape block website at the bottom there if anybody wants to go and check them out or go and watch the videos and learn more about it. Now, I know, Kirsten, it's a really difficult time to be in the higher ed sector at the moment, so I thank you a lot for coming in, and to all of those watching out there, if you do have friends, colleagues, family members who work in higher education, please be kind. It's a really difficult time for many, so thank you for giving us some of your time today. Thanks to everybody who's watching today, either live or on the replay. As I said, comment away and we can extend the conversation. I'll be back again next week. I have put out a new blog this week on privilege. So if you want to jump onto the website and have a read of that, just some of my thoughts on privilege, but of course I always talk lots about privilege on this show as well. So you've probably heard it all before. But please check out that blog if you're interested, or share it around. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kirsten. And
Thank you.
I'll see you all next week.